Russia says it is closely monitoring the configuration of the Western military alliance, NATO, on its borders. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was reacting to a visit by the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to Sweden and Finland. The two Scandinavian neighbors of Russia are currently debating about their NATO membership bid. The Swedish parliament is set to meet on Monday to debate on the matter further. Later this month, Stockholm and Helsinki are expected to announce their decisions on joining the alliance. The two have for decades maintained military non-alignment. Last month, Russia warned it would deploy nuclear weapons and missiles in the Baltic region if Sweden and Finland decide to join NATO. Russia is strongly opposed to the alliance's eastward expansion and views it as a security threat. Johnny Miller joins us now to tell us more about this from Vienna. Johnny Miller, welcome. When you take a look at what is happening here, it's astounding, and it keeps, and it shouldn't come as a shock anymore, but it does. When you hear news day in and day out about the military assistance, especially from the U.S., obviously, who its president asked for $30 billion and got $40 billion. How do you view that aspect of this conflict?
Well, this is now a proxy war between Russia and NATO, in which you have Ukrainians fighting over a territorial dispute within Ukraine, but NATO and Western countries see this as an opportunity to try and weaken Russian power. Many high-level American figures have admitted that freely. They're worried about the rise of China. They don't know how to combat that, and they're trying to weaken the Russian and Chinese axis through Ukraine. So that's why we see this massive military aid to Ukraine. But many analysts, including Rand Paul, an American senator, and Scott Ritter, famous former nuclear weapons inspector, doubt that any of this military aid can actually get to the front line and influence the war. Ukraine is a huge country, of course, and many of these NATO weapons we've flown into Poland or neighboring countries, and Russia essentially has air superiority and is able to strike these weapons before they even get to the front. So there's also arguments that this is a huge boon to weapons suppliers in NATO countries who are using this to make money for themselves. This 40 billion in aid to Ukraine, it's very doubtful about how much it'll actually be able to swing the war in Ukraine's favor.
Another aspect to this, which many don't really reflect on, and by many I mean either analysts or just online publications of a variety of sorts, and that is what would a win look like, either for the U.S. and its NATO member countries, and also for Russia?
Well, most of all, I mean, I'm going to Donbass in the next couple of days, and most of all, I'm concerned about the Ukrainian people. What does a win mean for the Ukrainian people? I have contacts in the west of Ukraine, and they tell me that they would be okay with a peace deal that involves independence for Donbass and Luhansk, the east of the country, and Crimea going to Russia. The problem is the more area that Russia takes over in this war, Kherson, for example, which is just above north of Crimea, the harder it is to secure peace. So for many Ukrainians, the more area the Russians take over, the harder it is. But many Ukrainians would be happy with a peace deal that involves Donbass and Luhansk becoming independent and Crimea becoming part of Russia. But when you talk about now that it's a proxy war, now it's not just what Ukrainians want or what the people in Donbass want, it's what America wants and what Russia wants. And the fear is amongst many analysts that NATO wants to prolong this war as long as possible for the help of the arms industry, but also in the forlorn attempt at weakening Russian power. So there's many fears that this could turn into another Vietnam, another Afghanistan, that could last for months or years. Of course, in Afghanistan, recently the Americans fought the Taliban for 10 years plus and eventually had to withdraw, and the Taliban is still in power there. So it's unclear whether Ukraine can actually defeat the Russian army, and there's a lot of propaganda coming out of the West that Ukraine is winning, but there's a fears that this war can go on for months or years just in order to try to damage Russian power, but it's unclear whether that will actually happen.
My final question, since I'd like to take advantage of having you on air right now, Johnny Miller, is the fact that when you take a look at the respective U.S. officials who have obviously supported this this war, nothing really stood out more than having the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visiting Ukraine, and I'm not too sure what she was doing there, or she could have done that via Skype, except for the fact that to thank Zelensky and then I guess say, keep the war going, because I'm not sure she was there to tell Zelensky, please stop the war, let's go for talks, because that's not what the U.S. is interested.
Well, that's it. There's a lot of propaganda coming out. We've had Bono, who's a famous Irish singer, go to Ukraine. There's President Biden's wife has gone to Kiev, and it's amazing. And the President of Canada has gone to Kiev. I'm going into Donbass in a couple of days, and I'm on all the Telegram channels. And the fact is that a lot of Ukrainian soldiers are being massacred by Russian artillery at the moment and being buried in mass graves. And for Western leaders to go to Ukraine and get a tour around Kiev and to have some smiling pictures, it's not really seeing what the war is really like when dozens of people are being killed on both sides, civilians as well, every day, because that's the reality of what's happening in the east of Ukraine. And these Western leaders or Western personalities going to Kiev, where there's not really a war going on now, and being shown the bright side of the war. But there's a lot of propaganda. Zelensky is being bigged up in the West by being seen as this great war leader, and the West is saying that Ukraine is winning this war, when the reality on the ground is very different.
All right, Johnny Miller, thank you so much for that. Johnny Miller there talking to us live from Moscow.